We're going to ask the question, can we improve equine performance under the premise that trace minerals may play a role? The question is, how do we evaluate improvements in performance when it comes to our equine athletes? If you take something like humans, for example, you can see that over the last 100 years, we've made great improvements as far as the time it takes a man to run a mile. Is that due to nutrition? Is that due to training? Is that due to genetics? I doubt it's genetics. Obviously, humans have a closed gene pool, so training and nutrition may play a major role in that. But if we think about that same type of idea in horses, these are the times for the Kentucky Derby over the last 115 years. You can see we've made zero progress. Horses that ran the Kentucky Derby 80 years ago ran faster than the horses that have run over the last few years. So, the question is, does nutrition play a role? What can we do to try to improve performance? One of the major concerns in horses is lameness, and we know that bone health is a major concern. Many of our race horses and our performance horses have a lot of issue with trying to keep them sound and keep them to be able to continue to race and or show for us. There's many causes for lameness in horses. Some of them may truly be mineral deficiencies or probably more mineral imbalances. We also have to consider something called too much too soon, which is related to how we train our horses. And then we also have to realize that bone in a horse is changing constantly. And by that, I mean it's a very dynamic tissue. Most people think of bone being solid, but that's basically in horses, bone does change in relation to the amount of exercise that a horse is doing. Here's an example. On the right-hand side, this is a front leg bone of a 2-year-old horse that's done no exercise at all. And on the left-hand side is the same front leg, section of the front leg, from a horse that has been racing for about 4 or 5 years. You can see the dramatic differences in bone mineralization, and that was in response to the amount of exercise these two different horses were exposed to in their lifetime. Over here we have an example of looking at what just 100% calcium fortification would do to a horse's bone in relation to 150% calcium fortification based on National Research Council's recommendations for calcium fortification. What you see is that if a horse has been static or doing no exercise at all, as we start to exercise him, his bone actually gets softer. It's getting softer because he's mobilizing calcium, phosphorus. He's relaying down bone in response to the type of exercise he's doing. Here's part of the problem. As we start training our horses, at about 6 weeks, these horses are feeling really good. They're exercising really well. We think they're ready to go back to full competition. But you can see that if under-fortified with calcium, the bone is not even back to where it was before we started exercising. In other words, the bone is not remodeled adequately to offset the stress of exercise. Well, one would say, well, we'll just give him extra calcium, and that will make his bone stronger. The problem with that is that oversupplementation may cause as many problems as undersupplementation. And here's what I'm talking about. If we look at some of the common interactions of minerals, both macro minerals and trace minerals, you can see that high calcium actually binds up trace minerals. By trace minerals, I mean the ones that we need in very minute amounts, things like zinc, copper, manganese, selenium, etc. And you can see there's a lot of relationships in the environment of a horse that may cause problems with the absorption of these trace minerals. Traditionally, we fed minerals just to prevent deficiencies. With today's modern athletic horses, obviously we don't want to do that. We never want a deficiency. We need to be looking for the right form of mineral to optimize performance in these athletes. One of the ways that we can do that is try to provide minerals closer to what nature would provide minerals as if the animal was allowed to eat enough of these fortified grasses, forages in nature. What nature would do as far as a plant, whether that's a grass or a vegetable or a grain, it would take something like zinc out of the environment and store it so that the animals or the horses could utilize that zinc when it needed it. So companies like Alltech, we've actually mimicked that technology, and now we can provide these trace minerals very close to what nature would do if it was given enough time to do so. We can actually test this theory by comparing the inorganic trace minerals versus this new organic technology. We did a trial where we looked at digestibility and growth rates of exercised horses. And in this trial, we basically exercised the horses on about day 50. The diets were all formulated to meet and or exceed NRC recommendations like all horse feeds are. And we looked at copper and zinc compared to industry levels. Now, NRC is significantly lower, and we know that most horse feeds have significantly higher levels of things like copper, probably closer to 50 parts per million, as well as zinc, which is probably closer to 200 parts per million in most concentrated horse feeds. What we did is we displaced about 45% of that total mineral, so we took away about 45% of that 200 parts per million of zinc, and we added it back as this organic trace mineral we call bioplexus. And what you see is that even before exercise, the horses that were offered this organic trace mineral technology had significantly higher copper status, but more importantly, after the onset of exercise, you can see that trace mineral status was starting to deplete. Remember, we talked about bone remodels or adjust to the type of exercise. But when we fed these horses the organic forms of these trace minerals, we were able to significantly improve copper status by just displacing part of that trace mineral package with this bioplex form of minerals. We also did the same with zinc, and you can see significant improvements in daily zinc balance by offering the horses these organic trace minerals or organic zinc. Another benefit of zinc, obviously, is in hair quality. From a human standpoint or from a horse standpoint, we know that zinc is very important in keratin deposition. Keratin is what makes up things like hooves as well as hair. And you can see that simply feeding these horses organic zinc, the hair coat quality or the quality of the hair was significantly better than their herd mates that were fed the inorganic zinc form. But when we talk about performance, remember, it's not the fastest horse that always wins the competition. It may be the one that gets the least tired. That's why we're always very aware of things like antioxidants, but trace minerals can have a huge role in this. When we look at things as something like selenium, there's forms of organic selenium, which we call Cellplex, versus the inorganic selenium form that's typically fed in horse feeds. So when we want to compare these two in exercising racehorses, it's a very simple exercise, whether we're looking at percent of intake or percent of absorbed selenium in the diet. In both cases, there was significant advantages to the horses that were fed this organic form of selenium. Like we said with the other trace minerals, zinc and copper, when we feed the organic form, it's more available to the horse. He stores it for when he needs it later on during bouts of exercise. Here we see horses, how they respond to selenium after exercise. And what you'll see is that when Cellplex or organic selenium is in the diet, the horses actually maintain or retain more selenium, particularly after exercise. And those of us in the horse industry know that we have a lot of problems with sore muscles, etc., which have been linked back to things like selenium deficiency. What it looks like by feeding the right form of selenium, we can avoid some of these onsets of things like tying up or azoturia, as we call it in horses. Another interesting observation was that after exercise, the horses that were fed the inorganic form of selenium actually excreted it significantly more than the horses that stored that selenium in their muscle for later use. So, by using this organic form, we can significantly improve selenium status in our exercising horses by offering them just a different form of this trace mineral. When we take these exercising horses and expose their blood to something called a free radical generating system, in other words, we take their blood, we bombard it with free radicals, we want to see how they respond. The horses that were fed the diet with organic selenium or Cellplex, significantly better able to handle this oxidative stress. So selenium is a very strong antioxidant, and when we feed it in the right form, the horses can store it and call on it or utilize it later when they need it. Let's also remember trace minerals as far as reproduction, because we know that in all other production species, reproduction is the key to profitability. And in horses, these horses are worth a lot of money. But remember, things like zinc, copper, manganese, selenium, very, very important in reproductive efficiency of all species. Horses are no different. Particularly on the male side, we know from other species that selenium is very, very important to male fertility. And on the horse side, where these horses are commanding tens of thousands of dollars in stud fee, selenium is very, very important. It's actually preferentially retained in the testes of horses. It's a very strong antioxidant, like we saw from our exercise studies. And it's also involved in everything from the formation of sperm cells to their ability to capacitate or fertilize the egg. Very simple studies where we fed no added selenium at all versus the inorganic selenium form versus this organic or cellplex form. And you can see that as far as percentage of normal sperm cells, almost perfect when these animals were offered organic selenium. Very, very significant improvements in sperm quality when these animals were offered this organic form of selenium in their diet. You can see that the amount of extender required to ship semen on these animals, significantly higher extender, which means we have more samples to ship on these stallions. Also on the mare side, when we look at fertility, as far as quality of embryos, significant advantages is in far as excellent or good quality embryos, as well as structures on these embryos, simply by feeding this organic form of selenium. So overall, on the mineral summary, organic zinc and copper improve status, zinc status, copper status in exercise horses when compared to the traditional inorganic forms. Horses given cellplex selenium were in a more positive selenium balance. We know that selenium status changes during exercise, and by feeding something like cellplex and the organic chromium, our horses are better able to be supported during maximum aerobic exercise. And don't forget, organic trace minerals can be very important in helping to improve reproductive function. In conclusion, targeted organic mineral supplementation can be a valuable tool for helping improve the productivity of our horses. Thank you.